First, I'm going to tell you about the two companies that create the Concorde aircraft. One of them is British Aircraft Corporation. This company was created in 1960 through the merger of four companies: English Electric, Vickers Armstrong, Bristol Airplane Company, and Hunting Aircraft. This merger resulted from the need to the English government to consult the aviation industry. One of the first contracts BAC wanted was to create a supersonic all-weather attack aircraft called the TSR-2. In 1963, BAC acquired the guided weapons interests of both Bristol and English Electric. 2 years later, the TSR-2 project was consulted, which was a major blow to the company. However, it continued to be successful due to another aircraft it had created, the BAC 111 Lightning Canberra and BAC Strike Master. A year later, BAC reached an agreement with the Bridger Company to create a fighter plane called the Space Cat Jaguar. The first prototype of this plane flew for the first time in September 1968. Finally, in 1977, BAC and Hunter Searle Aviation merged to create the British Aerospace plc. And today this company is called BAI Systems. The second is Aerospatilde. This company was founded in 1970 with the merger of three companies: Sud Aviation, North Aviation, and Serra. Aerospatilde is a French aerospace company mainly involved in civil and military aircraft and rockets. In 1991, this company helped to build the chassis of the Bugatti IB110 supercar. 1 year later, Aerospatilde and Denley-Benz Aerospace AG joined forces to create Aerocopter, a helicopter company. Finally, today this company is known as Airbus.
Good evening. Today we would like to tell you about an invention that want to completely break the speed of sounds and that want to change the history of aviation. That airplane was called the Concorde. In the mid 1950s, several world powers such as the United States, United Kingdom, France, and Russia began to support projects to create a supersonic aircraft that would allow them to make long-distance trips in a very short time, but very few countries were successful in this race. For example, United States were two companies that sought to create this aircraft, but none were successful. Russia succeeded in developing a supersonic aircraft called the Tupolev Tu-104. This plane even flew first than the Concorde, but died to an accident in 1973. It could not hold on the market and thus put the Russians out of the race. The UK managed to develop an aircraft that was originally going to be the model of the Concorde. This aircraft was the 223 aircraft, and France had two state-owned companies working together to create a low-range supersonic aircraft. But there was a moment where the British government told the project directors that they had to find another ally since the government had no more budget to support. This is how the British directors looked to the French for support to develop the supersonic aircraft. In order to achieve this British-French alliance, they had to face many problems because they had such strong disagreements that the British and French governments had to get involved. It was thus that at some point diplomatic relations between these two countries was finished. But in 1962, the French ambassador Geoffroy de Consul and the British Minister of Aviation named Julian Amery put aside their difference and reached an agreement to build the supersonic aircraft. This agreement was so strict that it had a clause that said that if one of the parties were to withdraw from the project, they had to pay a fine that could be higher than the cost of the project, regardless of whether it was successful or unsuccessful. After the agreement between the governments to make the supersonic plane was already in place, an alliance between the British Aircraft Corporation and the French company Sud Aviation began. But here another problems began to arise. The British company want the name of the plane to be Concorde, while the French want it to be called Concorde. Finally, these companies reached an agreement and gave the name Concorde to the supersonic plane on the condition that the letter E represent the excellence of Europe. In 1965, work began of the first two prototypes of the Concorde. 001 was built in the French city of Toulouse and 002 in the United Kingdom. This project was very ambitious because they want to build an airplane that had a cruising speed of 2179 kilometers per hour. In 1967, the model was launched before the public, and on March 2, 1969, the first flight on the Concorde 001 was made, piloted by the Frenchman André Tucat. This was a historic moment because at that time it initiated an important change in the aeronautical industry. While on April 9, 1969, the first flight on the Concorde 002 is made in the United Kingdom. The Concorde stayed for a long time doing tests to perfect its aircraft, but in 1972 an American aeronautical engineer named George Edwards reserved 5 Concordes for the BOAC company. Finally, in 1976, the Concorde began operating commercial flights on the New York-London and New York-Paris routes.
As of 1972, in full development of the test and with the sudden stop in these tracks, a cascade of cancellation began by the airline already committed. This was due to several factors. Although the plane was going to fly as fast as promised, its range was not going to be as spectacular as was thought, which commercially hampered the intention of the airline. Added to that was the 1973 oil crisis, which triggered the price of fuel, something that had not been taken into account as a decisive factor for the development of the device, nor were the environmental aspect, of which there began to be somewhere hours after the oil crisis. To the above factors was added a political campaign by the United States aimed at hitting the waterline of the European aerospace industry, while the Concorde was a technical marvel and the airline's ultimate benefit greatly from operating it. It is also true that the aircraft did not offer operating performance conditions that would make it attractive to any company other than a few airlines with ocean operation, and the flagship airlines of manufacturing nation, to which the equipment was sold on particular favorable terms. Its limitations are well known: restriction for its operation at supersonic speeds over populated areas, low passenger capacity, range just large enough to cross the Atlantic between West Air, Europe and the North American East Coast, and high operation costs derived mainly from its fuel consumption. These characteristics were not ceased to be seen and taken into account by an airline that had the power to bring it to the life or into its complete proposal from the manufacturers, I mean Pan Am, a company that had converted its purchase option for its aircraft into orders. This has generated similar action for other airlines such as TWA, Continental, Braniff, and American Lufthansa, Qantas, Japan Airlines, Air India, Easter, Air Canada, and others that followed Pan Am when it cancelled its option to buy the Concorde and ordered the Boeing 747, making it a success when the rest of the big transatlantic airlines also bought it. One of those charter trip related to high precision power tours was the one that marked the beginning of the end of the Concorde on July 25, 2000, the 845 Paris, New York, occupied by passengers traveling to the United States to board a luxury cruise ship, ended up crashing in the vicinity of the airport. A series of unfortunate coincidences caused the plane to catch fire while taking off, and uncontrollably it ended up falling on a small hotel. This event had a negative effect on the confidence of the aircraft, despite the fact that the accident was found to have been caused by a piece of metal from a Douglas DC-10. However, the plane continued to operate for 3 more years. The 109 occupants of the plane died in the accident. The first passenger flight after the accident occurred on memorable date September 11, 2001. The aircraft landed at JFK on the same day as the attack of the Twin Towers, another place in the United States, with commercial planes. What really ended up sealing the supersonic dream of the Concorde was that in 2003 the Airbus company refused to take care of the maintenance of the Concorde, which caused the final decision to stop operating all its units. The ambitious European supersonic project ended up being limited to the construction of 20 units, of which only 14 carried out commercial service and are now museum pieces. Several initiatives from our focus on business and personal visibility, as in this case the histrionic and imperative Richard Branson, who was running as a continuation of the Concorde under his Virgin brand without revealing that Airbus had always denied him and technical support, since the manufacturer provided by default closed that chapter. The last commercial flight operated by the French company took place between New York and Paris on May 31, 2003, while the British made its last London-New York flight in October of the same year. But was the Concorde a failure? Without a doubt, it was not. The Concorde was one of the most important achievements in the history of aeronautics worldwide, and also brought with it one of the first successful experiences of international technological cooperation. It was also the first commercial aircraft of any type whose aerodynamic design process was led by a woman, and it was also one of the few commercial aircraft with a 27 years record of uninterrupted services from 1976 to the day of its retirement in 2003.
So now I'm gonna talk about some curious facts. Of the 22 Concorde aircraft they developed, 7 were left by British Airways, another 7 by Air France, and the remaining 6 took off. Why? We don't know yet. In its 27 years history, the Concorde only had 2.5 million passengers. It carried out a total of 5,000 flights during its entire useful life. Some of these who traveled aboard the aircraft were personalities such as the singer Elton John and Mick Jagger.
The actress Taylor Swift, and the actor Sean Carney, and of course the Queen of England. Another curious fact was that its price was high. A ticket from London to New York cost more than £6,500 sterling at the time. Traveling long distance in short time meant having to spend many liters of fuel to supply much more powerful engines. The Concorde consumed an enormous amount, 25,000 liters of kerosene per hour. A conventional commercial airplane burns about 4 liters per second, which means approximately 14 liters per hour, almost half of what the Concorde consumes. Another fact, the menu at the Concorde was worthy of fancy restaurants. Many bottles of champagne are consumed on board its flights, a million in total. Among the dishes were lobsters and truffle salad, smoked salmon pie, or Guinea chicken breakfast. Of course, it also have an extensive vintage wine list. The Concorde doubled the speed of the sound, flying at 200 kilometers per hour, something never achieved before. It was much more than an airplane. It became an instrument of economic and social prestige for France and the United Kingdom, and a synonymous for class, elegance, and luxury. Despite everything incredible he did, he went down in history with a much less unforgettable image. Okay, now the conclusions. Um, air accidents almost never happen from a single cause. Neither did the Concorde. There were many unfortunate causes for the world's fastest airline to burn out of control, some avoidable, and almost all unpredictable. It should be said that the supersonic plane was not removed by the accident of 25 of July, but by the circumstance of the time, it is high consumed, and some environmental complaints, such as the noise, made the airplanes up for simple aircraft. So that's all. Thank everyone to pay attention, and now we're gonna do an activity in Kahoot. Goodbye.